You know, there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господ да ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
It has been over a month since the Macedonian Content Farmers gathered to talk about all things Macedonia, but it's not for a lack of issues. Most recently, Vilma Ruskovska, the head of the Public Prosecution Office for Organized Crime and Corruption, was suspended from her office. Apparently, she had accused Arafat Moremi, the director of financial police, of certain crimes. He has now resigned, and there is finger-pointing all around. Turning to EU accession and Bulgaria, which are one and the same thing for Macedonia today, it appears that Bulgaria, which has a caretaker government yet again, will be giving Macedonia a specific list of what it wants in order to open EU accession talks. Don't expect that list to be made public. Related to that is the joint commission between the two countries, and it appears as though the Macedonian members have caved in and agreed, yet again, to Bulgarian demands, this time by agreeing that Tsar Samuel was Bulgarian, which means that children's textbooks must now be changed. And there is more on the way. And then there will be the new, quote, investment, unquote, in Tetovo, for which Ali Ahmeti and his party, the DUI, are taking credit. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin in Skopje, Macedonia.
Cvetin, how are you? How is Skopje? How is Macedonia?
Good, it's a bit warm, but it's not unbearable like last year. We had a decent summer. Now preparing for the coming winter, in which we'll be...
Already?
We'll be missing... Well, you gotta start early when you have to chop the wood and gather those corn thingies, husks, what you call them, for heating.
That's right. Yes. So yes, the government is implementing new emergency energy measures starting September 1?
Yeah, they're going to have the public sector reduce heating, cooling. Prices are still going higher. And we're also antagonizing Russia with sending tanks and airplanes to Ukraine, which means that if they want to pick one country in Europe, they want to, to serve as an example to all the other better paying countries, that they'll freeze for a few months just to entice everybody else to pay in rubles. We're at the moment a solid candidate. So...
Hey, but Macedonia is going to be rich. You got this new investment in Tetovo. I forget the minister who looks like a chipmunk. What's his name? Is talking about all the EU money coming in now. So you guys are going to be whistling to the bank on your way to the bank.
Yeah, one of the benefits of NATO membership. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be such a beautiful mess. I'm eagerly anticipating this thing blowing up in everybody's faces.
Well, I'll tell you what, misery loves company, right? So I think all of Europe is going to be freezing or at least turning down the thermostat this winter. And here we are, it's funny talking about this, it's still bloody summer. But we'll see on that. And of course, prices are going to continue to increase. We skipped a month here. I was in Estonia for a few weeks, which, by the way, you can get Pelesterka mineral water in Estonia. Yes. Wow. So I was out canoeing on the Tallinn Bay and drinking Pelesterka, which was a highlight. But their inflation rate is 21%.
Wow.
So don't complain too much, okay? So.
And they won't only have the gas cut off; they may see actually more invasive measures.
Yeah, we'll see. But anyway, all right. Well, that's all off in the future. Let's start at the top here. We've got some near future. True. Yes. Reminds me of the I was joked about the movie posters at the Kino Millennium in Tverkovsky Center. They would always have a film being advertised. It says coming soon. It would appear 9 months later, that was the definition of soon. So, all right. But now, what's going on literally this week as we talk? So, Macedonia's public prosecution, I mean, the courts in general, have had a hard time since the beginning of independence 31 years ago. And of course, famously, the special prosecutor, or the as she was named, Katica Yaneva, the best special chief prosecutor in the Balkans, or whatever she got an award for, is in jail right now. And Vilma Rushkovska, the head of the public prosecution for organized crime and corruption, she has been suspended because she accused Arafat, named after the Palestinian terrorist leader, for some reason, director of financial police, of certain crimes. Anyway, finger pointing. She's been suspended. Has she actually resigned? He's resigned, right?
He withdrew. He resigned, and she was suspended.
Okay. And what is she accusing him of, and what is he accusing her of? And
so, of course, she can't say publicly, but she ordered a raid on the office of the financial police, which Arafat has been running since SDSM was in power. He's Albanian, but he's seen as more an SDSM guy than a DUI guy. And he was widely accused in the public of racketeering, of extortion. So she did not say what the crime is she's suspecting him of, but it was reported that he was muscling in on businesses. He had his cronies, his people, businessmen, he's close to go after targets, after businessmen who have a lucrative business, and they would go and say, listen, my friend, the head of the financial police suspects you of some crimes here. He may go after you. He may launch an investigation on you, unless you sign off the business to me, in which case you'll be fine and get some money out of it and disappear. So some of these people apparently complained to Ruskovska, who, I mean, these are all SDSM people. These are all regime people. Ruskovska was famously the prosecutor who went after the protesters in the storming of the parliament with the purpose, with the goal to force free members of parliament to vote with SDSM to change the name of the country. So she's a complete SDSM crony. But they're infighting between themselves. And she had some secret police officials who Zaev fired. She took them in. And obviously, of course, she brought down Katica Yaneva. She launched the investigation on Katica Yaneva for racketeering, even though at the same time, like months earlier, Katica Yaneva and Ruskovska were tag teaming, were jointly going after opposition members of parliament. So Katica got like 5 of them to vote for the name change. Ruskovska got 3. So they were so tight, they were practically the two sides of the same coin, or the one side of the same coin. But they started infighting, and we suspect that she was going to charge Arafat with racketeering. Ruskovska now holds the position of special prosecutor, which was left vacant after she arrested Katica Yaneva. And she immediately had the chief prosecutor, who is above her, but should allow her to act kind of like independently. The chief prosecutor, Ljubomir Joveski, immediately condemned her for her action. He said that there were some minor infractions in the way she organized the raid. Arafat Muaremi, the targeted financial police chief, he in turn submitted criminal charges against Ruskovska, against several of her prosecutors, accusing them of financial crimes. He immediately responded with counter charges, which was very funny and very banana republic. And even more banana republic was when Ruskovska said, okay, I'm going to go for my trump card. I'm appointed to this position with support from the U.S. Embassy, which strongly supported the changes to the law on prosecutors, which enabled her to take this position. And she sent a letter to the U.S. Embassy, to the EU Embassy, to the EU prosecutor Laura Kövesi. And she said, I'm being pressured here by my chief prosecutor. And she strongly implied by the government in general not to investigate a corrupt official. And the response was she shot her shot and she missed. The response was that the embassy, the EU Commission, they practically said, listen, it's your internal matter, you do your thing, we don't care. And after she did not receive any response, she practically was dead in the water, and now Chief Prosecutor Joveski suspended her and appointed one of the most ridiculously corrupt prosecutors under Katica Janeva, Lila Stefanova, as her replacement. Oh, yes. So it's still the same parade of people from the old special prosecutor's office. Stefanova was named by, even recorded, I think, by businessman Orza Kamchev. He accused her of asking that he gives her an apartment, a large office space for her daughter to set up a dentist office in one of Kamchev's buildings. And she said, I'm going to stop all this investigation into you. So, yeah, another one ridiculously corrupt prosecutor is out, and another is taking her place.
So, I mean, this is classic. The snake is eating its tail. The revolution is devouring its own. I have to admit, Cvetin, as I was listening to you, which was a good, solid, robust explanation there, but as I was listening to you, I thought for a moment you were talking about the United States, because you said Trump, as in Trump card, you said raid, you said banana republic, and then you said U.S. as in U.S. embassy. And I was thinking, oh, wait a second. No, he's not talking about the raid on Trump by the U.S. DOJ under Biden that makes us a banana republic. Just remember, and for all our listeners out there, the next time Kate Burns gets up and lectures Macedonia on rule of law and says that, everybody, must be equal before the law, because that's the way we do in the U.S. Just remember, she is lying. That was the subject of my most recent column. That they're all liars. It's all been a lie. If what's going on with Trump, and I assume some of our listeners know what the recent search is the technical term of his home, of an ex-president, never happened before in the United States history. Search of a former president's home, Mar-a-Lago, Florida, for ostensibly presidential records that he took with him, classified materials, whatever. And yet Hillary Clinton set up an internal server in her own bloody home as Secretary of State and trafficked in classified emails. But of course, Comey, head of the FBI at the time, said we're not going to prosecute her. So next time Kate, says, we have rule of law and we equally apply it in the United States, just do me a favor, folks, laugh in her face. The only way you can deal with these people is to laugh at them and point your finger at them and laugh at them, because they're bloody fools. Anyway, into my tangent and rant there. So we'll see how that plays out, I guess, over the next weeks and months. I don't expect it to be solved anytime soon. Arafat had the classic, nice little business you got there, Gav. Be ashamed that something happened to it. But yeah, it's and interesting point you made that he's more citizen than Dewey. So that's an important point. Okay. Yeah.
And once you mentioned our governor, Prime Minister Kate Burns, our chieftain here, she's actually out soon, and being replaced by an old friend, Angela Aguilar. She was public relations officer of the embassy under Philip Ricker at the time when they were putting in place both the USAID funding for SDSM and Soros media in Macedonia, and weaponizing the reports on media freedom against the government. They were looking for this soft issue like political dialogue, media freedom, LGBT rights. They could exploit against Gruevski, paint him out as a dictator. So she was in the embassy while this was going on. And she's coming fresh from Pakistan, where she served, I think, with her husband, who was also here, sparking various speculations what's his actual role in the country. They're a team, like a diplomatic spousal team. And she's coming fresh from Pakistan, where the U.S. obviously staged a coup against the very pro-Russian government there. They were not playing ball with the U.S. on Russia, and were promptly color revolution. We're having a new prime minister coming soon.
Wow.
She actually confirmed in Senate.
Oh, okay. Wow, you're following this closer than I am.
Granted, I was my prime minister.
Yeah, I can be forgiven a little bit. I was in Estonia and I've had some other issues going on. So when is she coming? Do you know?
Not sure, but already confirmed in the Senate, and just picking the drapes or the old drapes.
So here she was. She was the public information officer. Cvetin, what have I done wrong with my life? I'm in PR. I've been in PR for years. How come I don't get to be a prime minister somewhere? Sorry, ambassador somewhere,
Well, if next time Trump is president or somebody like him, if they actually change something in the State Department,
they won't.
Instead of elevating Ricker as a Trumpian candidate, maybe we could have some change of guard. Otherwise, they change the drapes maybe, but the bed sheets are all the same, dirty, soiled, stinking to high heaven. But that's what we get here.
It doesn't matter who the president of the United States is. The State Department will not change. They are very insular, a bubble. They promote and protect their own. Not much you can do about them except hope that they grow old and die. Or, they don't have to grow old to die. But anyway, turning to EU accession Bulgaria. So I can't remember this. See, we did this in mid-July, and at that point I don't know. I can't remember if the French-Bulgarian proposal had been accepted by Macedonia. Anyway, it has been. The funny thing is, so both for listeners as a refresher, Macedonia and Albania theoretically can now start accession talks, although Albania actually has started intergovernmental conference. I don't know what all the technical jargon is, but Macedonia still has not been able to start accession talks and will not be able to start accession talks until it agrees to a list of Bulgarian demands, one of which, of course, as I mentioned, is related to the History Commission. The other one, of course, is changing its constitution to make Bulgarians part of the peoples within Macedonia, etc. But, of course, Vumero and has said that they're not, Hriston Moskovski is not going to do that. Where do we stand specifically on that issue of changing the constitution? What does the government say? That they must have a timeline. They want it to happen right away, right?
It's not necessarily. They can drag it out, or they can try to do it sooner. It depends on. We had like a very ceremonial meeting in Brussels, which the government here is labeling the start of accession talks, but we keep splicing our accession process. So first we became a candidate country, the first candidate country, which did not automatically begin accession talks in 2005. Now we're the first candidate country that that had the first meeting. It's called like an intragovernmental something meeting, which is normally the start of the accession talks, but without, again, opening chapters. So they keep inventing new interstages for us, things that would happen naturally with other countries before when they were candidates. So they had this photo op meeting, but the actual opening of chapters for accession talks is blocked until we amend the constitution and include the Bulgarian community in the constitution. And this requires 80 or 81 votes, depending on interpretation, and this requires somebody from Vumero to vote in favor. Vumero obviously are very opposed to this, and especially bearing in mind what we mentioned, this previous blackmail arrests of Vumero members of parliament for the name change, which keeps being brought up against Vumero as, you betrayed us once, even though the party was under unprecedented assault by internationals, by prosecutors, by terrorists, etc. At the moment, there is no indication from the government when they want to try this. And Mickovski, the Vumero leader, is daring them to do this. His position at the moment is the following. You put this to a vote in the parliament immediately. If you get the 2/3 majority, if some from my party betray my party and vote with you, I'll retire from politics. And if not, if you fail to get to 80 or 81 votes, we hold early elections. And the SDSM in response is just spreading these rumors that, well, we are already in talks with some of your people. They're going to betray you anyway. Don't worry about it in due time. But, it's very... There are no more, like, last time there were people from satellite parties, like the Bosniak party, the Roma party, ethnic minorities, unfortunately, like Macedonian Muslim, not an ethnic minority, religious minority, member of parliament who switched sides. Now the party has much closer ranks. It's possible that somebody's blackmailed or heavily bribed. Weimar is saying that we want a referendum on the French proposal. Do we want to join the EU? Now that the condition is implementing Bulgarian demands on the history of Macedonia. This referendum could play both ways. I mean, they still haven't announced the actual question they want to propose, but they said they're going to start collecting signatures from citizens that will make the case for having a referendum stronger. If the referendum is called and fails, maybe by boycott from the government this time, like Weimar boycotted the 2018 name change referendum. In this case, some members of parliament from Weimar could say, okay, the people chose, obviously do not care much about these issues, so we'll now vote to unblock the EU accession and then hopefully spark early elections. We'll see. But there is the new moment which we actually had this past few days, which is very interesting, is that so we're awaiting. We had the historical commission publish some of its previous, what they call, issues they reached agreement on, specifically on the ancient history and on the medieval period. And this was apparently agreed way back in 2019, so practically early in the work of the commission, which at the time said we have reached agreement on Tsar Samuel, on medieval saints Cyril and Methodius, Clement of Ohrid and Naum of Ohrid, etc. But this was never published. And it was indicated that it's going to be bad. The fact that this was never published indicated that the Macedonian side made heavy concessions. And now they finally published the agreement. Under the French proposal, they had a deadline to publish them until practically today. So they published them a few days ago. And you can sense where things are going. So in the case of the saints, this is way before we had any national identity. This is in feudal times, but it keeps being mentioned that they came to the Bulgarian state. They were supported by the Bulgarian medieval state. The Bulgarian Tsar Simeon, gave them refuge or funding to continue their mission to share Christianity. And the word Macedonian is not mentioned, obviously. In the case of Tsar Samuel, they have like a cop-out statement. It says the leader of the large feudal medieval state, who in most of the world history, world history books by world historians, is considered, or actually not him, but the kingdom is considered to have been a continuation of the first Bulgarian Empire, of the slightly earlier Bulgarian state. So this keeps being inserted in what's called a compromise agreement between the historians, and this will then be introduced in history books. This is already mentioned, obviously, in our history books, but now the emphasis is being put on. It's said that the saints were, for example, Cyril and Methodius were recruited by the Byzantine court, not by Bulgaria. But now there are points mentioned, like they are greatly honored in Bulgaria, and they were first honored as saints by the Bulgarian church. So there was strong efforts to find, to add, to insert more and more mentions of Bulgaria in the text. So this is going to be what the Bulgarian historians are angling for. And our guys, our head of the commission, came out with this completely out of this world response. He says, well, listen, we are above these petty identity issues, we understand, we are so above the fray, we understand that in medieval times there was not such thing as national identity. They're being ridiculous as they insist on this, but in the end we agreed, let them have their fun, they kept pushing this, so we said, okay, fine, well, who cares? And, it's obviously, the point of the Bulgarian government is that Macedonian school children keep learning that the medieval period belongs to Bulgaria. And in the ancient period also, there is emphasis put on the Thracian state, or the Thracian tribes and their culture, which we learn little about. We do not have much memory or, songs, or like we have for Alexander in the ancient Macedonians. We do not have this about the Thracians.
Who?
So, yeah. well, Bulgarians, they're having this nation founding myth there that they originate. So they're actually not all Bulgarians agree. Do they originate from the ancient I can't even pronounce it well. Trachia. We call it Trachia.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
not sure about it in English. The Spartacus guy.
Thracian. I think it's Thracian in English. So.
Thracians.
Yeah.
Or do they originate more from the Bulgar tribes of the steppes of nowadays Ukraine and Volga? Or are they more Slavic nation with some intermingling of Bulgars and whatever? But what is obvious is they're making an effort to introduce more, let's say, more Thracian content in Macedonian history books. And there is, on our end, we are allowed to make demands of the Bulgarians as well. And a response would be that, to say that this, Samuel state was not, something like the modern Macedonian state considers its, or invokes the legacy of Samuel state, something like that. Instead, we demand that, this is our request, that Bulgarian history books, when they teach about Thrace, that they broaden the borders, broaden the scope of the Thracian culture toward Macedonia. I don't know why we're asking for this. There is a good joke now in the here that SDSM condemned Gruevski for the process of antiquization,
Yes.
elevating the culture, the history, the achievements of the ancient Macedonians. But now SDSM is introducing Thrakization. They're going to have Macedonian children learn that we are close, we're descended from the Thracians. And there is another request from Bulgaria that we stop teaching in schools that the Macedonian church it's like the continuation of the mission of St. Paul the Apostle. Now, does this mean that the Bulgarian church intends to claim him more directly? Because there is a debate here. We had the church recognition, but Bulgaria is not recognizing the Macedonian church under the name Archbishopry of Ohrid. They want the Archbishopry of Ohrid as part of Bulgarian the legacy of the Bulgarian church. The Greeks are not recognizing us under the other part of the name, under the Macedonian church. They want our church recognized as the Archbishopry of Ohrid, and the Bulgarians are doing the inverse. So this is some of the compromises that were made here. It's not compromise. It's complete acceptance of Bulgarian demands by our guys. Are practically, they sound as written by the Greek historians. So it's very possible that these issues on the ancient period, on the St. Paul, this sounds a lot like the Greeks had their fingers in this pie as well. And our guys say, but listen, don't worry. We accept it all on the medieval period and on ancient history. We're Bulgarians until the modern era, but we will give them hell on the nation founding period of the 19th century, on Vemero, on the fight against the Ottomans. And then especially we'll give them hell on the Second World War, when Bulgaria will have to accept serious, deep compromises on the Holocaust. And so practically our historians say that they will draw a line on the nation founding process and on the only part of history that SDSM actually cares about, which is the partisan struggle in the Second World War. Actually, I'm pretty sure that they're going to cave on the Holocaust as well. And I'm pretty sure they're going to come up with some formula in which they're going to minimize the blame on the Bulgarian state, on the Bulgarian king or the government or the army. And they're probably going to try to paint Macedonia as an autonomous province in an attempt to blame Vemero people, the mayor of maybe Skopje, of Štip, of Bitola, something like that. They're probably going to, because this is a popular refrain now among SDSM people whose base is crumbling with every concession to the Bulgarians. There's even talk that Crvenkovski will form a new party directly to challenge Kovacevski on the Bulgarian issue. So one of the usual SDSM response is, well, we know that Vemero people often have Bulgarian passports. And now a more common refrain is, well, but you were collaborators with the Bulgarians in the Second World War, so what if we are collaborating with them now? So this is the SDSM response. I'm pretty sure they're going to try to even compromise on the Holocaust issue with the Bulgarians, just to save as much as they can from the glorious partisan communist struggle in the Second World War. This is my sense of where things are going with the Historical Commission.
That's great, and that's very detailed. I guess two things. Number one, it's worth pointing out, I mentioned in the monologue that Bulgaria has a caretaker government because they have elections yet again, October 1 or 2, I believe. I think it's October 2, that's a Sunday. Because the government fell apart. Kirill Petkov, right, the former prime minister. So this would be like the fourth general election in 2 years, or less than 2 years, something. They're competing with the Israelis on a number of elections within a given amount of time. So a lot of this, I think, is for that. And two, just to be clear, the Bulgarians have not claimed the Apostle Paul was Bulgarian, correct?
Not yet.
Okay, but we can look forward to that, I'm sure. So.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well. Anyway, the good news, of course, is that, you're going to get all this EU money. And now that Macedonia is a member of NATO and on its way to become a member of the EU, foreign direct investment is just pouring into Macedonia. The Prime Minister, Kovacevski and Zaev, can make excuses as to why it didn't come in, in the first 5 years of their combined term. But now, of course, it's all coming in. And now you've got this electric car company in Tetovo, apparently. I had never heard of this company. I don't even know how you pronounce it. It's small e dot capital G capital O, Ego, I guess. Is, German company, little tiny electric cars, government of Macedonia. It's going to be built in the technical and industrial zone, which the Gruevski government started ages ago throughout the country. But they're going to build this there. It'll create, I don't know how many new jobs. Of course, the government is going to subsidize this with I don't know how many millions and tens of millions of euros. And it looks like Dewey is basically taking credit for this. And when they've broken ground on it, what are the next steps?
They broke ground, yeah. So this all sounds very, very dubious. There have been almost no investment in Macedonia since Gruevski was toppled. even though at the time we were practically, if not breaking ground, if not opening a new factory every month, we were breaking ground for a new factory every month.
remember, yeah.
Many of them brought like a few thousand investments in, one in Veles, two in Prilep, one in Bitola. So practically this eradicated blue-collar unemployment in the country in a matter of 5 or 10 years. And nothing since then. Practically no new investment. Sometimes the prime minister would go to these zones and some of the existing companies would rebrand or open an additional line, and then they would portray this as huge success of the government. And now these guys come. So they say this is going to be the first car produced from scratch, assembled in Macedonia. Currently, we only assemble buses in
Van Hool.
one of the factories
Right.
Gruevski brought. And the company was set up in Germany like 3-4 years ago, trying to capitalize on this boom of electric cars, but saying, okay, we're going to use platforms from other companies like Volkswagen. They're going to give us practically all the parts, all the engineering. We just have to assemble it. And their invention is that they have like a novel form of a factory that's assembly line that's going to be like very small. And they, instead of having like a large gigafactory where all the cars in Europe are going to be, all the Teslas in Europe are going to be assembled in one factory, they envision like one in Bulgaria, one in Greece, one in Macedonia, one in Serbia. And they were shopping around the region. And this is why, this is the first thing that looks very suspicious, because you see them going to the Greek prime minister, you see them announcing a deal with the Bulgarian oligarch and the prime minister, and everybody's announcing all in the same terms, like this is, we're bringing this factory to your country, it's going to be a huge success. So far, they have only assembled like 500 cars in total in Germany, and they went bankrupt, and they started shopping with this model across the Balkans in some cheaper destination. In the meantime, they brought some Arab guy as their head of their company, who at the same time, who worked for Siemens in the past, but currently he's head of the board of Ecolog, which is a large company in Tetovo, owned by Lazim Destani, a huge business presence in Dui, in the Albanian part of Macedonia, who made his money in a very suspicious line of work, which is contractor for the US Army in Afghanistan. So he would send people to, clean up toilets. He would do like Halliburton things, like building army bases and stuff like that. You cannot do this without being in the good graces of the US government. And there was a lot of allegations that when he would send maybe like a truck of workers or of equipment to Afghanistan, it makes no sense for the truck to travel empty back to Europe. And since there's only one export product you can buy in Afghanistan and sell it in Europe, he was often accused of drug running, heroin running, and money laundering in Macedonia, laundering the money in Macedonia and running the drugs in Europe.
Could also be women and young girls. Sorry? I mean, it could also be trafficking in women and young girls. You could.
I think that's more like a domestic market.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And the soldiers are there. I mean,
yeah, that's true. So.
Yeah. The boys are domestic market, and the women are probably for the soldiers there. So this was he's been accused publicly, like media reports, but nobody would go after him.
No.
And then the government, its initial press release was that this is going to be subsidized to the tune of $130 million, which prompted outrage in the country, because this is like way more than any other company received. They would get like $5 million in kind. These would be all recognizable, notable companies producing car parts in Germany, and who would get like 5 million subsidies in terms that the government would already prepare the plot for the factory, maybe build the factory with our workers, and just you get like a finished factory which we own, but the country owns, but the company can set up its machinery and stuff. 130 million is, way more for an untested company, actually a company which went bankrupt, whose director is in the pocket of a very dubious businessman from Macedonia who has zero experience in this type of work, and DUI has never, they built one hospital in Tetovan. Look how that worked out for how that ended up. Yeah. So this is what we. The head of the industrial zones is Jovan Despotovsky from Shekerinska's company SDSM. He's notorious for giving, as a former director of the Innovation Fund in Macedonia, which kept giving grants to SDSM members of parliament, journalists for completely made up innovations. They would come with a stupid idea, in some cases, things they bought on eBay, from India, like a robot that detects pollution, and they would get several €100,000 in grant money because they allegedly came up with the invention. So he's now running the authority which will give the subsidies to the electric cars companies. So it's going to be a disaster.
This is one of those things, Cvetin, that they make a lot of noise about, especially because it involves DUI, and then we're not going to hear about it, or the whole thing's going to fail. Not to mention, of course, the broader, bigger issue of course, the EU is mandating, I don't know when, that at some point in the near future, diesel and gasoline vehicles have to be phased out. All part of the green agenda of banning fossil fuels, etc. Without really thinking about, number one, you got electric vehicles, but you still have to produce electricity. How are you going to do that? You still have to rely on coal. Wind and solar are iffy, depending on where you are and what time of the year it is, etc. And of course, led by Germany, nuclear energy is verboten. So you've got that issue, and then you got the issue of batteries, electric car batteries, which require certain components, shall we say, components that are largely available in China, which is not necessarily friendly with much of the West today for a variety of reasons. Anyway, all kinds of issues surrounding that. We'll see where this goes, but I'm not expecting flowers and puppy dogs and rainbows and Skittles to come out of this. So
it's going to be a huge corruption disaster, epic proportions.
Yeah,
I mean, it's still going to be dwarfed by. I mean, at the moment, DUI holds the finance ministry, holds the Ministry for Public Sector Hiring. So they're doing crazy things there. Especially now with the census, they're insisting that over 30% of new hires need to be Albanian, or of total hires need to be Albanians, which easily translates to over 50% of new hires. They're at the moment negotiating, or not negotiating, discussing with the US State Department about the Bechtel deal.
Oh yes.
How many billions do we sign on with Bechtel for a couple of highways, which the EU should be paying us for, and now DUI is negotiating this with a US State Department linked company, Bechtel. So that's going to be billions. This is 100. The government later said, okay, it's not all 130 millions in subsidies. The company is going to chip in something in its own production.
Oh, generous.
Don't we? Yeah, very. But this is going to be, okay, it's not the biggest fraud that DUI is currently negotiating, but it's a good one.
Well, it's in the top 5. Yeah, so.
Yeah, top 5.
All right. All right. Well, tell you what, I got to wrap this up because I got to run to the office still. So let's do that. But we won't go for a month before the next one. I think we'll do it sooner than that.
Yeah.
Maybe even with a little surprise there. We'll see. We'll talk more about that soon. Anyway, good to catch up on these issues, and we'll keep following them. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, laughing through the demise of the country.
Hey, mine too.
Both countries, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not looking great either at the moment.
No, we're not. So, oh dear. All right, we'll talk soon, Cvetin.
Okay, buddy, take care.
You too.